My guest today is Jonathan Haas, product manager at Vanta. Jonathan's work focuses on making security compliance faster and more accessible, helping teams move from months-long processes to efficient workflows that take just days. Before Vanta, he was the co-founder and CEO of cybersecurity startup ThreatKey, and before that, he held key roles at Snapchat, DoorDash, and Carta, where he built and refined compliance systems during times of rapid growth. Outside of work, Jonathan explores San Francisco on foot, experiments with sourdough pizza recipes, and is cooking a dish from every country in the world. He brings a product philosophy rooted in solving problems, blending data with user stories, and fostering inclusive teams. Thank you so much for being with us on the show today, Jonathan. It's a real honor to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, we've known each other for a few years now. I think you were fairly early on the platform with LimaCharlie, and then we've just sort of been in each other's orbit ever since.
Yeah, I mean, I've been using the platform for 6 years now, 5 years.
Oh wow, that is early days.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it was just like there was really and kind of continues to be nothing on the market like it. I think the idea of looking at this space just sort of as a really like, how do we build like the AWS, right? How do we build the building blocks, the Lego blocks? It just really resonated with me, and it hasn't been something I've seen anybody really pick up.
Yeah, I think there's an aversion at maybe like the business level for the established security oligarchy that's out there.
Yeah.
Because to them, they're going to lose if they move to this model. And so they're really entrenched. But I think anybody who's worked in IT or software engineering for long enough knows that this is really the way forward.
Well, and frankly, just looked at people's backgrounds, right? And I'm not talking about like their technical backgrounds, their literal backgrounds. People have Legos all the time. I've never met an IT or security person who doesn't like working with Legos.
Yeah.
Like taking things apart, building them together. It's a core part of who we are as people. We like figuring out how things work, why it works the way it does, and then, configuring it. This idea that every security product has to be this rigid thing that doesn't adapt to you because, well, they told you that's how it's got to be. It's silly.
And especially given how fast things are changing with AI and all the emerging technologies, like to wait for a vendor or somebody else to come solve a problem that you're experiencing right now is just not like a very secure way to think about things.
Not at all. I mean, especially nowadays, if you think businesses just as a whole, like I had a thing I wanted to write a way of telling people better technical feedback. I wrote an AI system for developing whether or not a particular piece of content was like specifically good feedback or not. Like that was not a particularly complex thing to do. I don't have a background in as much of AI and machine learning as I'd like. So being able to just jump in and do that with some of these tools is crazy. And a lot of this is those traditional security platforms that don't have that extensibility, can't adapt to your environment. I think a lot of them are going to be left behind just because when you have the ability to spin up new infrastructure, new whatever it may be, and all it takes is really just an idea, these platforms that allow that extensibility are going to go super far. The ones that don't are going to really just not.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I will do my best to keep us from turning this show into a LimaCharlie commercial. When I have guests on the show, I'm always curious how folks found their way into technology and more specifically cybersecurity. What was that path like for you? Were you a kid that grew up in front of a computer, or was it something you found later?
Yeah, unfortunately for my parents, I was a kid that grew up in front of a computer and everything that comes with that. I spent a lot of time, just as we said, taking things apart and putting them back together. Unfortunately for my parents, that was usually the computer. So spent a lot of time basically researching how does this thing in front of me actually work. We didn't really have the internet. We had very, very basic dial-up at this point. So a lot of it was just like, what is a text editor? I can write a program. What does that do? Thankfully, my parents were never really pushing against it. They were really, really eager to direct me into the right ways, but never something where I wasn't allowed to go in and look at, how does this work or what can I do? I think the only thing was like, hey, don't delete these tax files that we need, or don't delete your dad's documents, your mom's documents. As long as you stay in your own folder, you're fine. But they really encouraged it. And then from there, I managed to play a lot of online video games as a kid. And for a lot of them, I found communities that would sort of be around those video games, people who are developing like software applications, either for playing the game for you or software applications for making the game a bit easier. So something like a heads-up interface or display that the game just didn't naturally support. A lot of this led me into security, partly because game developers don't particularly want you doing that. But it gives you a really good sort of insight. And again, how things work, those Legos, fundamental building blocks.
Yeah, it's such a common first delve into security is the like modding games and getting around the security features of those games. I've heard that several times from people on the show. So it's interesting.
It's such a fun cat and mouse game. I mean, the thing is, like, those game developers are often the same types of people. They want to play it. So it's very fun just going back and forth. And I mean, with a lot of these, like, I mean, we're talking about real complex, like deep software engineering. I mean, one of these games we were doing this for was just like basically taught me the fundamentals of how Java worked by virtue of doing it.
Java, I haven't heard that in a long time.
Thankfully, right?
Yeah, no, that was my out of university. That sort of I landed in a Java developer role for 2 or 3 years and learned all things object-oriented programming.
I just know factories on factories on factories.
And don't forget the adapters. Right?
Don't forget those.
Yeah. So given you've been building and creating security products, I figured we could focus our conversation around that today if that works for you.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're starting on something new, what's the first thing you try and understand around the problem, the user, the system behind it? Like how do you approach things when you're first trying to build something to...
Yeah, so like 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, my answer would have been, I'm going to just start typing, start writing code. And
I think the kids call that vibe coding now.
It's the wrong response. If you're going to technology to solve the problem right off the rip, you're not really taking the time to understand the problem. And I found that with security problems especially, there's so much nuance. You really can't just start going in. So what I traditionally do is really just sit down with the person who I'm trying to help and piece it together from there. Can I help you, right? Are you even willing or interested in accepting help? Are you even recognizing there's a problem? And for a lot of security sort of topics, this is often something that people are a bit apprehensive towards. Not everyone wants to share their security posture. Not everyone wants to say, hey, yeah, we're actually vulnerable to this. So there's a lot of education that goes into it, and sometimes that's just telling people, hey, this is the actual problem space we're focusing on. I remember back in 2016 when I was at Snapchat, one of the things we were focusing on was malicious Chrome extensions, which was not a thing people were looking at in 2016, but it was an attack area that we really, really deeply needed to investigate, research, make sure that we had an actual answer to. Had we just gone in and said, hey, let's buy something off the shelf to solve that problem for us, we wouldn't have actually gotten to the depth of what we needed to solve, which was, hey, malicious Chrome extensions are becoming more and more of a thing. Google doesn't really have a way of stopping them right now. We need to get a handle on this. Code wasn't the way to solve that problem. It was talking.
So yeah, when thinking about problems to solve, how do you identify like where that friction is? What's something worth solving worth something maybe changing, like making operational change versus a software change, or like how do you find the problem?
Yeah, so it's just gotta be a real pain. And I'm not talking about a pain where you're like, I don't like doing this portion of my job. It's a bit, I've got to move this folder to that folder. It's a bit annoying. I'm talking about the thing that keeps you up at 2 a.m. where you're like, I absolutely hate my job. I hate this aspect. I want to change it. If there is a magic thing I could change, wave a wand, and it could be the thing, those are the types of pains you need to search for. Security has tons of these. They are all over the place, and they are really, really painful. I've worked on detection and response teams where we responded to literally everything, which was great for security, but for the people on those teams, it was awful. That's real pain. 3 a.m. being pinged, having to go investigate something because you don't have a way of automatically looking at it or automatically triaging whether or not it's actually important to you. That's pain. If it's not that painful, it probably doesn't matter all that much.
Yeah, I think in some of your recent writing on your blog, Haas on SaaS, which I love the name, by the
Thank you.
way, um, you mentioned something around the sort of fallacies or the traps that founders can get into where, your friends will pay for it, or you got a couple of users paying for it. And so now you think you've solved this pain in the market when the reality might be that it's a bit of an illusion. That's
Yeah.
sort of what you're alluding to here, right? Where
And
if you're not waking up at 3 a.m., it's
it really happens with technical founders as well. This idea that a couple of people are using it, they're kind of interested in it. Maybe it's doing some new detections you couldn't pull off earlier. Like those are all super interesting things, super valid things, maybe great technologies. But for building a truly sustainable, enduring business, you have to find something that is just so painful. Vanta's a great example where I work now because in Vanta's case, the alternative is spreadsheets. Like it is a painful, painful experience. Spreadsheets, screenshots, and you're putting it in SharePoint. You start adding up those S's, and we're talking the last S sucks. It is painful. It's time consuming. At best, right? You're putting these things in there, and then it's out of date by the time you put it in there, and then you got to track whether or not you put it in there. There's just all of that. There's so much to keep track of. So that's painful. And finding those real pains, not that your friend says, this is great, but your friend says, I needed this yesterday. I will pay you $50,000 for it. I don't care if you built all of it yet. I'm paying for it because I see the value. That is where pain is. And a lot of times this is going to come through people you don't know. One of the earliest things for us at ThreatKey to know when we were onto something was going to someone and pitching them on it. And they started repeating back what we were going to say to them about it. And with any real product that's solving an actual pain, you should be able to feel that. Your customer should be able to finish your sentences because you know that pain so deeply, so innately, and you've experienced it firsthand or spoken to so many people who have experienced it firsthand that you can articulate each step of it. You should be able to say, hey, yeah, when you're up at 2 a.m., and they should be looking back at you being like, I hate being up at 2 a.m. when I get those useless alerts.
So having somebody say, I'll give you $50,000 right now is a great signal, but probably an unlikely one. What are some of the signals that like somebody who's trying to think about a new product or bring something to market that like, how do they know it's not just like a nice to have versus something that might actually make a big impact and people will pay for?
So one of the silliest ones and is kind of out there is whether or not they're starting to navigate procurement for you. If someone is very interested in buying your product, there's a lot of internal things that their business very likely has in place to stop them from doing that. Now, a lot of businesses don't want to spend money on new tools. They want to say, hey, let's evaluate whether or not we have actually something here. But when someone starts walking you through the process of here's what selling looks like to my company, often a really good indication. One of the ways you might be able to get that earlier, if you're not really certain of it, is just watching them lean in. That body language, that expressiveness, really nodding along with your pain, not nodding to say, yeah, okay, yeah, like please stop talking, sales rep, I understand. This is useful. You need to make a commission, but I'm not interested. People truly understand pain and they're vocalizing it. There's just such a ability to go back and forth. You should be able to almost just let them talk when selling to somebody. If they are truly in touch with you and you are truly understanding their pain, you should be able to lay the framework out of, don't you hate it when X happens? And they should be able to tell you exactly X sucks. Because this, because that, because this, because that. It's really just empathy. It's attaching to the customer and attaching to what they're experiencing. You need to be able to go through it as well or convince them that you have.
It's hard to build products by yourself. Everybody kind of has to do it at the beginning, but as the team starts to scale, there's a lot of challenges in keeping people aligned. What are some of the signs that you've seen that show engineering and product and marketing and everybody is in sync versus not just like being aligned on paper?
So you should really, when you're truly in sync, be able to advocate for the positions of your counterparts. This is when you hear engineering talking about the product experience, or product talking about engineering constraints, or go-to-market talking about either of those two things.
Mm-hmm.
Vice versa, right? Thinking about pricing and packaging from a product perspective, or thinking about, do we truly have the cogs here to make a pricing decision when you're looking at engineering? All of these things you should start when you're in sync advocating for, kind of across the board. This is something that I've really loved at Vanta, because we really, really are in sync when it comes to product and engineering, to where my engineering counterparts are arguing for good product decisions that I should be making. And likewise, I'm arguing for good engineering decisions. This isn't to say that we're abdicating our responsibility or passing it to another person, but we're advocating for the things that they should also be advocating for. And doing this holistically in a really healthy engineering and product team allows you to really, really just expand. I mean, it's how you build really cohesive products. I'd add a fourth category in there, which is design. A lot of security products are bad at design. A lot of them. And I think it's because design for a lot of folks is an afterthought, right? Most of the technical founders that I speak to are that. They're technical founders. They're people who are coming from a lens of detection engineering, or they've been software engineers who are deeply interested in security. Design is often an afterthought, and it's reflective in their landing pages and in their apps, and often in just the way you interface with things. So sometimes it's helpful to bring in those perspectives, to bring in someone who says, hey, people need to use this for 12 hours a day. It should be pretty.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also like transmitting that design is much more than just how something looks. It's like how it works and how it feels, and it's almost like the adapter pattern for humans.
Yeah, I mean, how it feels is such a core element, right? We talk about just taste, and that is something that a lot of security products, I think recently that have really caught on, have impeccable taste. Mm-hmm. Right? It's in their landing pages. It's on their app. It's when you log in. It's when you sign up. It's in their notification flows. You can tell that someone really thought and crafted this. It's not just something where it's slapstick. Hey, I'm producing the newest thing, and I vibe coded this email. Like it's someone thought and really, really, really went in and considered end to end what that full product experience, with a full user experience is. And with security products, this is critical, right? We're not talking about something that's, I don't know, like an HRIS with a, hey, you got paid today notification. That's all pretty usually positive. Oftentimes with security products, we're like, hey, this is potentially about to begin the worst day of your career.
Yeah, and I like to think of like brand as a superset of design, and for anybody thinking about bringing a security product to market should know that security folks are very averse to marketing and sales by nature. We're distrustful folks, and we've been snake oiled so many times that we don't believe the things that you're saying. So trust is a big one, and I think brand and design and all of that come together to transmit the qualities of your company. So don't dismiss it. It's like a really worthwhile thing to spend the time doing.
Well, and a lot of security folks, when there is a very, very thoughtful brand, will really resonate with that. Obviously, I'm going to be biased and say, look, Vanta's brand, pretty great. But good. Wiz, another great one, right? Wiz's brand peaks. People love. They like going to conferences and seeing what crazy stuff Wiz is dreaming up next, because it's such a core part of their brand. Like they're fun, they're interesting, they've got really out there stuff. Security products that have a good brand, security companies rather, that have a good brand, it's not just, hey, we've got a product that you're paying for, and that's a thing that we both do. You're showing up selling me something, I'm showing up buying something from you. When there's a brand and there's really just like this almost movement behind it, it's really easy to start blurring the lines between company and like mission. And this is a group of people accomplishing something versus just, this is a group of people, we raised some capital, now we're going out to sell this to somebody to then go sell the company to someone else at the end of the day.
Yeah.
When there's truly brand, truly like movement behind it, that's when I think security companies really hit their stride. And you see this with a bunch of them. I mean, CrowdStrike really in the early days built that like fascination behind their brand, and they've leaned into it, and it's what makes them it's what makes them CrowdStrike.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like to think about like narrative versus story. And that sort of, I think Ross Howlock, who, one of our ex-LimaCharlie alumni, He'd wrote that cybersecurity needs less mercenaries and more missionaries, and I think that was sort of what you were alluding to, right?
It really
there, is
does.
like mission-driven stuff, right? So when you decide, okay, this is the problem we're going to solve, I've got my team together, like, are there rituals, or like how do you get everybody on the same page and get them wanting to believe in the mission and solve this problem in a meaningful way versus just showing up and clocking the clock?
So I'm going to be very, very corporate here and actually say write down your principles.
Right.
I know it sounds silly, and look, as an employee, I would always go and be like, yeah, we've got principles, but like, let's be real, corporate principles, kind of bullshit. You know, people just say them for the sake of saying them. That couldn't be more untrue. When a business says, hey, these are the things that are important to us, this is what really matters, for a lot of founders, that is the thing. That is the thing from day one that they are obsessive about, and that will permeate throughout the organization. If you say that we've got a bias for action, there better be a bias for action. If you say we win as one team, same thing. There's a lot of these things where organizations that truly live up to their principles and truly live into their principles, it's a great way of just like throughout the product, the people you speak to, the experience, all of those should coalesce into one like singular living entity, and you should be able to really see that through those principles. That should also say what you don't do. I think a lot of folks tend to say, hey, this is the box we're in, and we do everything inside the box. We don't do anything outside of the box. I think defining what's outside of the box is really important, and often where security companies lose their way because they'll say, hey, we want to secure things, which is a great goal, but it's a very broad one. So being able to say, hey, we're doing these specific things, we are the experts in this, we will solve this specific problem for you, and we will solve it better than anyone else in the world. That's really how you get that mission. That's really how you coalesce the just raw talent, right? And you get folks who are saying, hey, I am solving this specific problem for people better than anyone else in the world. And should we build a business around that? There is something there. We can build something enduring because we're going to real people solving a real problem that has measurable impact. And that's the last thing, measurable impact. If you cannot measure the problem, you don't really have a problem. You need to be able to put something in front of someone and say, this has changed. The world is fundamentally different now than it was before. Before you had our solution, before you had our technique, before whatever it may be. But you have to be able to prove that.
Right. So when thinking about features and as a product grows, how do you balance the decisions between like the short-term wins versus longer strategic bets that, you know, maybe cost a lot of resources and don't have the immediate payback?
So I really like to think of this kind of like almost like a seed stage investor would, where you should look at your product as a series of very, very small bets, where there will be bets you're going to double down on, right? You find your winners and you throw more capital in them, just as you would a seed stage investor. But you don't put full force into everything right off the get-go. Look, I've done this before. It's a bad approach. It's one where, yes, you may have supreme conviction in a particular approach, but unless you really have that customer traction and truly product market fit, I'm not talking about customers tell you it's nice. I'm talking about customers are slamming on your door saying, please give us access. We need it. You gotta have that.
So is there anything in SaaS right now that you think is a lot of hype or overplayed?
I mean, we're seeing a lot of very, very, I'll call it not even entry level, but sort of first or maybe like second order thinking AI agents, where folks are saying, hey, we have these agents now, they can do tasks for you. But the tasks we're giving are still things that traditional SaaS applications would be able to solve. So all we're doing is we're saying, hey, this discrete unit of work that one person's doing now, this agent's doing it. That makes a lot of sense and will probably help people go from like SaaS 1.0, SaaS 3.0, whatever SaaS 0.0 we're at, to the next one. But I don't think it's right. I think really we need to kind of reimagine, like, how does work get solved in this world where we can have sort of essentially fancy cron jobs doing the actual work for you, off doing, spawning other cron jobs to go do more work for you. Like, there's a very, very interesting world with that, but I'm not sure it's one where you're logging into a dashboard or looking at things in the very traditional way SaaS has been today. So I think there's a lot of hype there, but there's also a lot of opportunity. I don't think it's hype with sort of needless or empty promise. It's just, it needs direction. I think a lot of folks are building things because they're cool, which is great, but they need to sort of see, okay, well, within that, like, what is cool about it? Like, why are we drawn to this? And that thing probably isn't just because it's doing extra work. It needs to be something deeper than that, finding that additional pain. One of the ways I've seen folks looking into this, as an example, for taking screenshots is just saying, well, can we use like Operator, one of these implementations, to actually go and just take those screenshots for you so you don't have to log in? There's a lot of stuff like this where it's like, let's reimagine what work actually looks like in this future. And until that's really sorted out, it's going to be hard to differentiate what's hype and what's not.
Yeah, having a North Star versus like, look at this cool trick that we can do.
There's a lot of really cool tricks. I mean, that's the thing, right? I remember when everyone's Twitter feed turned into anime, photos, and it was cool and it was awesome, but it was a lot of what's the substance here? Like, this is very neat, but what's next? What are we actually doing with this? So there's going to be a lot of hype. There's going to be a lot of very, very splashy demos. There's going to be a lot of, frankly, ARR that's probably not recurring, right? Because there's a lot of people making early bets and saying, hey, this looks super interesting, but it's just that. It's super interesting. Whether or not it's going to withstand the test of time, we'll see.
So what kind of stuff are you working on right now? Like, what are you trying to get better at?
Yeah, so I'm really trying to get better at AI evals. Looking into especially how we actually determine whether or not these systems are performing in the way we want to and returning the types of information that users actually expect. I think this is a very interesting space because a lot of these sort of implementations as they exist right now are just completely non-deterministic. So you're kind of thrown to the wind and hoping for the output you want. But it's a very fascinating space where we're using this technology to solve the technology problems it's creating. And, it feels kind of strange to be writing a judge for another program that's being assessed. Like, it's just crazy how these things sort of work. You're writing a program to go judge another program. Like, that's crazy, but it's really cool. So a lot of what I'm doing is looking at stuff like that and really just trying to, especially with my day job at Vanta, go deep on some of the cloud stuff that we're looking at. So you see tons and tons and tons of people releasing new cloud infrastructure. We want to make sure we're supporting that and really diving deep into what the security issues and compliance issues are for those.
Yeah, it is really fascinating. You mentioned the AI systems being non-deterministic, and it makes it really hard to test things. And then you get other AIs to test the AI that you're using. And I know we had a guy on the show not too long ago, Dennis Chow, who wrote a book on detection engineering. And internally, they've built something they call the precog system, where they have 3 different LLMs vote on the results of what they're trying to determine. Yeah. And so I thought, that's kind of great, because at least on average, you're going to probably end up with the right answer versus just trusting the one AI.
Well, and it's totally holds true. I wrote about this a bit ago, but in even just assessing technical feedback, we had 3 different pieces for scores because there's a lot of depth to technical feedback, and just asking, hey, is this good feedback, really isn't actually the question you're asking. You want to blow up feedback into a more sort of abstract and capable of being built out concept, right? What makes good feedback, and decomposing it that way.
Yeah. Compliance versus AI, they seem like opposite sides of the spectrum as far as speed of deployment and stuff goes.
Yeah, but the big thing too, right, is they are increasingly becoming intertwined. Like, we're going to need to figure out really what does good look like for compliant AI and vice versa, right? What does compliance look like in a post AI world?
Yeah. Okay, so this is the last one I have for you. It's the one I ask of everybody that comes on the show. It can be as wide or as narrow as you want. Do you have any predictions for the future of cybersecurity?
Oh, yes. I think this concept that Vanta's made, continuous control monitoring, is gonna continue to be a thing. And broadly, beyond just controls like we think about them today. When you look at things like you've got two-factor enabled, you've got our back setup. It's interesting, right? It's important. It's critical we take track of these. But I really think we're going to be in a world where we continue to see these just expand outwards, where you truly can actually have a sense of what compliance is holistically across the board. What that looks like, I have no idea. But the idea that companies are this living thing where compliance isn't just a point-in-time process, but actually something that evolves over time, I really think is where the world is heading. We see this right now with some of the things we're trying to do where we can tie your policies closer to your actual infrastructure. But in a world where increasingly trust is so critical and you have to interchange with hundreds, if not thousands of different counterparties every day, I think really we're going to see a world where compliance, security, these things are at the forefront, and truly how we track them, how we sort of identify what's going on, either within a company we do business with or with our own data even. I think that's where the future's headed. What it looks like, no idea. But the idea of a future that is continuously verified, continuously trusted, and continuously compliant, I think is where we're going to be.
Yeah, and I love that Vanta's helping to make that more accessible, because I think as compliance becomes more and more of a requirement to do business with other people, like you're saying, it's harder for the garage startups to get into that game. I know when we did our SOC 2, like that was a big lift. That took a lot of resources, and if you're just a couple folks with laptops trying to make something happen, some of this might be daunting. So having companies working towards making that stuff more accessible, I think, is just such a great mission.
Could not agree more.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming to talk with me today, Jonathan. It's great to have a time to chat with you again, and hopefully we'll get to connect again in the future.
Thanks for having me.